Hey everyone! After 3 long weeks, I finally finished this entire video. It was a long process, but it paid off. Wait, allow me to change to something a little more formal, so we can get started. Roll the clip! The Roaring Twenties was a period of economic prosperity and cultural growth. Music, dance, and fashion took off, veering from the traditional norm, as everyone adopted a newfound independence. It was really a time to party. There we go. Now let's get started. First off, the best thriller film of the 1920s. I love old films, mostly thrillers. In the 1920s, the film industry really took off because there was more time for leisure activities, like movies. At this time, movies were silent, so you actually had to pay attention. Silent thrillers are a bit like a theatrical play. They are usually slow-paced, but in a positive way. This is how they build up tension and create a chilling atmosphere. Communication is reduced to gestures and mime only, but is emphasized by the background music, played by a small orchestra. The lack of words only helped their cause, making the scenes more mysterious and sometimes even more horrifying. Once you get in the mood, silent thrillers can give you one hell of a ride. So, let's see who our finalists are. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, 1920. Two friends visit the popular show of Dr. Caligari, featuring Caesar, the somnambulist who has slept for 23 years in a cabinet and can foresee the future when asked in his trance-like state. He predicts that Alan, one of the two friends, will die on that very night. They don't believe this prophecy, but when Alan is in fact found dead the next morning, his friend Francis becomes determined to track the killer down. The Lodger, 1927. The story is based on the crime novel of the same title, first published in 1913, written by English novelist Marie Belloc-Lundis. A Jack the Ripper-like serial killer, known as the Avenger, is loose on the streets of London. He hunts on foggy nights, and his victims are young blonde women. When a mysterious man arrives to Miss Bunting's place, looking for a room to rent, she suspects he is the madman the police are looking for. The Man Who Laughs, 1928. The story is based on the classic novel of the same title, first published in 1869, written by the acclaimed French dramatist Victor Hugo. It tells the tale of Gwynplaine, who has a permanent smile carved on his face by the king because of his father's treachery. His character later inspired the popular Batman villain, the Joker. Blackmail, 1929. When her date goes wrong and the man tries to rape her, Alice kills him in self-defense. She attempts to remove all the evidence and then leaves the man's home. However, it turns out there was a mysterious witness to the killing, and he plans to blackmail Alice. And now for the winner of the best thriller film of the 1920s goes to The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. As one of the most famous thriller films of the decade, an influential expressionist masterpiece, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. It's interesting to know that its sets were made out of paper and its creepy shadows were actually painted on the walls. This movie had a very interesting plot and was well executed. I quite enjoyed it. I would just like to thank all of the amazing people who helped make this performance possible. This is truly a vast honor indeed. Thank you. Our next category is Most Influential Jazz Musician of the 1920s. Fletcher Henderson. Fletcher Henderson is often overlooked as one of the great 1920s musicians, but his impact on jazz music cannot be denied. He was an integral part of 1920s jazz and helped define the later style of big band. He was an American pianist, bandleader, arranger, and composer, important in development of big band jazz and swing music. He was considered one of the most influential arrangers and bandleaders in jazz history. Henderson's influence was vast. He helped bridge the gap between the Dixieland and the swing eras. Jack Teagarden. Jack Teagarden took a new and modern approach to playing the trombone in a jazz setting. He is regarded as the finest trombone player of the jazz age. He had few predecessors to emulate. The trombone had been primarily used as a supporting instrument in a jazz band, and wasn't used as a solo voice until Teagarden came on the scene. Eddie Lang. Eddie Lang was a jazz guitarist without peer in the 1920s. Lang played primarily with violinist Joe Venuti. This duo stood out as masters of their respective instruments at an early age, and were both regarded as the two of the most finest 1920 musicians, giving rise to the guitar and violin as capable instruments within the jazz idiom. King Oliver. Surprisingly little is known about Oliver because he left no interviews about his interpretation of jazz or his vision of music as a whole. It's been said that Oliver took 10 years to refine the tone of his cornet so he could blend the sound seamlessly into his band. It's also been said that at the time without Oliver's band, at that specific point in music history, that Armstrong may have never risen to the heights that he achieved. And the winner for most influential jazz musician of the 1920s goes to Fletcher Henderson. Since Fletcher Henderson was considered one of the most influential arrangers and bandleaders in jazz history, he had a vast influence on the music scene in the 1920s. I mean, he helped define the style of big band later on. He was an important part of the development of jazz. Without him, who knows where we would have been. I'd like to thank all my fans and those who've played with me. This is to many more years of jazz. On to our third category. Most influential pieces of artwork. As an artist, this one was pretty fun. At the time, two art movements, Surrealism and Art Deco, had their genesis during the 1920s. The Surrealism movement began in post-World War I European avant-garde literacy and art circles, and many early Surrealists were associated with the earlier Dada movement. The Surrealists developed techniques such as automatic drawing, developed by André Masson, that would later become significant parts of Surrealist practice. On the other hand, Art Deco was a movement in decorative arts that also affected architecture. Art Deco is characterized by use of materials such as aluminum, stainless steel, inlay wood, shark skin, and zebra skin. The bold use of zigzagged and stepped patterns, and the sweeping curves and chevron patterns, and the sunburst motif. Art Deco did not originate with the Exposition. It was a major style in Europe from the early 20s, though it did not catch up to the US until about 1928. New York, early 20s, 1920 to 1924. Missouri-born artist Thomas Hart Benton pays homage to his adopted city of New York in this oil composition, presenting a bird's-eye view of Madison Square Park. Internationally renowned as a pioneer of the regionalist art movement, Benton studied the urban space within New York, depicting moving people who are painted as dark majestic figures, filing neatly past stationary vehicles. These figures weather the dark storm forming above the imposing skyscrapers and the American flag. The Tempest climate is set during a period of personal and professional unrest for Benton as a lifeist and sympathizer. Mining Gate at Midnight, 1927. Will Longstaff's depiction of the Mining Gate War Memorial in Europe's forms part of a collection at the Australian War Memorial in Canberra. The composition captures the spirits of soldiers marching in unison across a cornfield under an indigo sky. After attending the unveiling of Mining Gate in July 1927, Longfield claimed to have had an apparition of the steel-helmeted troops. The artist went home to London and completed his tribute in one sitting. The red poppies in the foreground represent the blood shed during World War I, and the limestone memorial on the left shows a dark and sinister entrance. Buildings are dotted upon the far horizon, suggesting that the area is under close scrutiny. Chop Suey, 1929. Edward Hopper's picture of social realism is comprised from a composition of multicolored geometric rectangles and depicts a scene within a Chinese restaurant. In the center foreground are two women who appear to have an ambiguous relationship. They mirror each other's solitary and aloof demeanor across a bright table in green and purple cloche hats. There is no tactile interaction, and the lady in green hides her hands in a defensive manner under the table, suggesting uneasiness. The four figures depicted are meeting for a social event, but the irony lies in the mutual lack of interest and spontaneity, which leaks through their detached facial expressions. A man in the background, talking with a female friend, seems to enjoy his cigarette more than his date. Hopper catches each person's loneliness despite them being in a public open space. A mixture of natural and artificial light is seen throughout the composition. The sun reflects off the billboard directly on to the white tables and the woman in green, giving her a ghostly parlor. History of Mexico, 1929 to 1935. Funded by the Mexican government, Diego Rivera's mural took 6 years to complete and can be found in the stairwell of the National Palace in Mexico City. Diego presented a narrative to the public which sympathetically portrays Indians as the oppressed minority brutalized by the Spaniards. Comprised of 4 sections, the largest mural piece stands 70 meters by 9 meters. The north wall is dedicated to a representation of Aztec culture, incorporating the symbolic sun with a pyramid and an Aztec leader underneath it. The west wall depicts the history of welfare with Cortez and the Spanish armies defeating the opposing forces of the Indians and the Aztec. The south wall represents all that Rivera loved and was inspired by the red communist flag to socialist Karl Marx and an artist and wife, Frida Kahlo, alongside her sister, Christina. School children are represented in the section symbolizing peace, unity, and future progress in society. And the winner is Mine Gate at Midnight. All these pieces have such an impactful message. It was so hard just to choose one. This one, though, the dedication the artist had to complete it in one sitting, the representation with the poppies as the bloodshed during the war hits home with me, as I use flowers for all sorts of representation in my own art. It's a lovely tribute to such a tragic event. Finally, our last category. Literature. Reading was a popular recreational activity, especially during the winter months, when other forms of activities were limited. Prior to radio and television, most people gained knowledge of the wider world and current events through printed material. Consequently, books, newspaper, and magazines were an important part of most people's lives and formed a larger part of their wider education. A knowledge of the classics was considered an essential part of a good education, and well-rounded home library was considered a sound investment. The Beautiful and the Damned by Scott Fitzgerald, 1922. As Fitzgerald's second novel after The Great Gatsby, The Tale of Society, Anthony Patch and his beautiful wife, Gloria, is thought to be based on the relationship between Fitzgerald and his wife, Zelda. As the couple's relationship becomes ravaged by alcohol and vice, the novel paints a devastating portrait of New York nouveau riches. All Quiet on the Western Front by Erich Maria Remarque, 1929. Remarque's World War I Army experiences inspired him to write what is now hailed as the best war novel ever. A heartbreaking story about the irreversible damage that war brings. It reveals the gruesome realities of trench warfare and the bewildering alienation felt after finally coming home from war. Winnie the Pooh by A. Milne, 1926. Everyone's favorite bear first appeared in A Christmas Story commissioned by London paper The Evening News in 1925, and a book featuring Pooh's fellow inhabitants of the 100-Acre Wood followed after, about a year later. Winnie the Pooh was originally based off of a bear that Milne's son, Christopher Robin, owned. The character has grown, and the Winnie the Pooh stories have since been translated into over 50 languages, including Latin. Les Enfants Terribles by Jean Chateau. This dark and twisted story of two siblings playing a very dangerous power game was written in just 1 week whilst the author was trying to wean himself off opium. Recognized as Chateau's best novel, it forms part of his impressive tome of works that established him as a pioneer of the avant-garde movement. And the winner of Best Literature of the 1920s goes to Winnie the Pooh. Okay, hear me out. Winnie the Pooh has been a staple in the lives of many children since creation. Everyone remembers Winnie the Pooh from their childhood. We all remember the yellow bear with the red shirt, always looking for honey, getting stuck in trees and honey pots. And we always remember his friends. Tigger, Piglet, Eeyore, Rabbit, Roo, every one of the 100-Acre Woods. It's such a big part of childhood. And it's been around for so long. It's our childhood. Well, now we have reached the end of the show. I would just like to thank all my amazing friends for helping out with everything, especially Sam. She helped me edit this entire video, and without her, I don't think I probably would have been able to do this. So, I just can't say thank you guys enough for what you did. And thanks for watching!